Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Faith Savaiano. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Manager at AnitaB.org, and I'm thrilled to be moderating a panel today on behalf of the United States of Technologists Initiative. Also known as USF Tech seeks to empower 10,000 technologists into public service across local, state, and federal government. Today, I am so excited to be joined by the lovely panelists we have here for a panel called Exploring Civic Tech, Coding It Forward. The folks you see on your screen have a wealth of experience in civic tech and have great experiences and insight that they can share with you today. Before we dive in, I'm going to kick it to each of our panelists to introduce themselves. So Nick, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, I can get us started. Hey everyone, I am Nick Marda. I am a senior and master's student at Stanford, where I'm studying political science and computer science. And I was a Civic Digital Fellow in 2019, where I worked on product management at the NIH, specifically at the National Center for Biotechnology Information. I was helping them build tools to help them move a large amount of data to the cloud, along with a number of resources and other pipelines related to that transition. And since my fellowship, I've continued working at the intersection of technology and government, with a bit larger focus on technology policy and regulation. So I've gotten to explore the policy side of things too. And I am so excited to be here and talk about Coding It Forward and the Civic Digital Fellowship.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Nick. Rachel, how about you?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Dodell. I am one of the co-founders and currently serving as the executive director of Coding It Forward. I was actually part of our inaugural cohort of fellows back in 2017, and I worked at the U.S. Census Bureau on a project to help connect small business owners with government data, make it easier for them to understand and use from a non-technical perspective. I've been with the Coding It Forward team pretty much ever since, helping to build and scale our programs. So happy to share my journey with that and tell you a little bit more about the organization.
Awesome. And can't wait to dive in. Emelin, round us out.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Emelin Flores, pronounced she, her. I was a fall 2020 Civic Digital Fellow, and I was a privacy and product management data fellow. Also worked on a little bit of data science. So I wore a lot of different hats, and I worked on interesting projects on organizing databases and also writing consent language for privacy, privacy concerns. So that's what I did, and I got a recent grad from Rutgers University from the winter. So took my labs classes, and I'll be a privacy engineer at Google soon. So that's a little bit about me, and happy to be on this panel.
Awesome. Thank you. Congrats. It's very exciting. And we're happy to have you all here. Thanks for your time. I'm really excited to talk to you all about Coding It Forward and then just civic tech generally. And kind of along those lines, Rachel, I was hoping you could kick us off kind of setting the scene here. So 7% of all federal employees are under the age of 30. Coding It Forward focuses on a younger cohort, of course. So can you tell me about kind of the fact that those statistics are what they are and how you saw the need for Coding It Forward, and maybe even what is Coding It Forward for those who are unfamiliar?
Yeah, for sure. So maybe I'll start with what is Coding It Forward and then dive into kind of our story a little bit. So Coding It Forward is a nonprofit organization. We were founded in 2017, and our mission is to create more opportunities and pathways for young technologists to enter both civic technology as well as social impact technology more broadly. We've done that in a few different ways, with the Civic Digital Fellowship kind of being our flagship initiative. But we've also launched some other really exciting programs like the First Act Fund, which is a small grant program for young technologists building technology with an impact, as well as the Civic Innovation Corps, which is our new state and local offering as well. And then we also have a one-year fellowship program for recent graduates where we place them in both nonprofits and social impact organizations. So we have kind of come up with a variety of programs to really serve this gap that we've identified, that there really aren't a lot of entry-level opportunities out there for mission-driven young people who want to use their skills in this way. Oftentimes, when I was in university a few years ago, the recruiters that came to our school all worked for private companies. They were all in the private sector. I very rarely engaged with anyone who was even broadly speaking in the social impact sector. And so working with my co-founders, we kind of identified this problem and recognized that our friends in the political science department, our friends in the humanities were often engaging in this space, but pretty much no one we knew in computer science or a technical field was. And so it started off as kind of this newsletter Facebook group where we just wanted to convene young people thinking about this space, and pretty soon realized that there was a lot of eagerness around serving and public service. And we were fortunate enough to be connected with a few folks who served under the Obama administration as presidential innovation fellows and who also worked in the Office of Science and Technology Policy. And they were willing to kind of take a bet on us that first summer and help us establish the program at the census. In terms of that statistic you mentioned, this is where things I think become really important at a federal level. The statistic is even worse when it comes to federal IT workers. It's actually under 3% are under the age of 30, and I believe it's now up to 14% who are over the age of 60. So there's kind of this growing age gap happening in the federal IT workforce right now. And there's been a big struggle in kind of recruiting the next generation into this space. So we wanted to help build those pipelines, get more young people interested in working for the federal government, making it an attractive and competitive opportunity for these students, because frankly, the recruiting mechanisms weren't there when it came to the federal government, and make this more of an opportunity. And I think it's really important that we think not only about the people who are under the age of 30, but also all the folks who are eligible to retire in the next 5 years. There's going to be a major deficit of folks who are able to tackle these IT challenges in government. And we need to think very seriously about how we can continue to build the talent on-ramp into government.
That's great. Thanks, Rachel. And Nick and Emelin, as folks who kind of answered that call and were drawn to Coding It Forward, I'm really curious what inspired you to go that route, and how it came across your radar even. Emelin, if you want to kick it off, and then Nick would love to hear from you on that as well.
Yeah, I guess the way I learned about it was actually I went to this Women's Tech Policy Fellowship in DC, and I remember talking to I guess she was like a recruiter or something. It was like a mixer, and she looked at my resume and she was like, "Hey, you're a little bit too technical. You have like no policy background. Maybe you should check out Coding It Forward." And I was like, "Oh, what?" And then I went back to the hotel room, looked at it. I noticed that like the deadline was like a couple of days. It was coming. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to apply and see how it goes. And fortunately I was selected. And I had always wanted to like serve in some kind of government, whether it was like local or like federal. I just didn't know what route that would take. For me, it felt like I either had to join the military or I'd become like a politician or something like that. There was like no in between, like where can I use these skills? And I think Coding It Forward was like that perfect thing that I want to do and get involved in, and I hope to continue get involved in the future. So yeah,
that's awesome. Very well timed mixer turned out to be.
Yeah.
Nick, how about you?
Yeah, so for me, I was at Stanford doing all these tech things, and I was also really interested in like public service, public policy, government politics. Didn't really see anything at the intersection, and at my university in particular, there's a lot of gravity toward traditional big tech careers. And so I always felt myself sort of getting pulled into that, but knew that I wasn't actually really excited about that work. I just knew very early that I wasn't going to find meaning in that work. And one of the things that was a really high priority for me was doing meaningful work. And so it was a combination of those things, plus at that time, a growing interest in product management specifically, that got me really excited when I saw the Civic Digital Fellowship in my inbox. I think it was on some CS for social good type mailing list at Stanford. I had signed up for all of them because I was seeking something that was a little more meaningful. And I saw this and I was like, wow, that's all of the boxes I want to check, right? It's using my technical skills in product management and in government and public service. And so I was really excited about it when I applied and went through that process. And as I talked to people in the interviews and talked to people who had done the program, started to realize that this was a really awesome opportunity and that more broadly it was very possible to do meaningful work at the intersection of technology and government.
That's great. And so then to kind of flip that on its head, now as alum of the program, looking back, what are the benefits that you feel like you got out of your participation in it? Nick, if you want to take that one first.
Sure. So a couple things. One was to the point I was just making earlier about meaningful work. It convinced me that there's a lot of meaningful work to do around technology and government. There is so much. And like Rachel was alluding to earlier, we need more young people to come in and do a lot of that work. So really glad to see that Coding It Forward has continued growing and bringing more young people into the fold. But I do think the biggest sort of benefit of going through the program was finding a community of like-minded peers. The Coding It Forward community is easily one of the best and most meaningful communities I'm a part of. It is just such an awesome group of humans, everyone from Rachel and the folks who run the program to all of my peers. And it really was just such a good group to be around as I tried to figure out like how I could fit into this broader constellation of tech work in the government, to have people to talk to who are thinking about similar questions, working on similar problems, who had similar career goals. All of that together, just being around those folks was really awesome.
That's
yeah,
great.
And I think, I was going to say, I think I want to piggyback on Nick. I mean, those are like the two top for me too. It's like that impact aspect. And I just wanted to highlight like that before that I came to Coding It Forward, that like I did some work in election security, but it was so informal. And I didn't, and one of the things that like one of the directors that I was working with was just like, oh, we wish we had more interested people like you. And I was like, oh, okay. And then when I found Coding It Forward, I was like, I get to do this again. Like that was amazing. So getting into this field and meeting people, and I guess like a little bit more, not just about the impact and the community, which are amazing, but also like the network you get. You get to really see the problems that need to be addressed, whether that is either local or like federal. And you're like, okay, well, this is the kind of work that I want to do. This is like how I want to, contribute to our society. And I think that's the most important and impactful thing that you can do. So that was really something that I got from the community, because we constantly talk about this. I don't know about you, Nick, but like I have like a group of friends outside of the Slack that we constantly talk about, like, okay, like what's our next move? Like, what are we doing? So that's always nice.
That's amazing. And what I'm really hearing too is not just is the work meaningful and the program is great, but it's really culture of community and people who are kind of sharing these same values along wanting to drive impact and pursue public service. So that sounds amazing. And so Rachel, I would ask you, for someone who is watching this and considering the program, what are some of the programmatic things they can expect in terms of alumni engagement and how they'll be engaged throughout the Coding It Forward process?
Yeah, so after the 10 weeks of the fellowship are up, we kind of have this phrase where we say once a fellow, always a fellow, because we really believe that the folks who have engaged with us are kind of part of our lifelong trajectory of growing this space. It's not a great, you did our internship, see you later. We really want to continue fostering talent in the civic tech space. So as Emelin alluded to, we have a fairly large Slack community. We now have over 200 alumni from the past almost 4 years of the fellowship. And kind of through that, we do a variety of activities with folks. Every month, we actually host a book club where we talk about a book that's kind of relevant to this space. For this month, it's Weapons of Mass Destruction. We're also going to be reading a book about government entrepreneurship next month. We've read Sid Hurrell's recent book about civic technology and kind of everything you need to know about it. And that's been a really fantastic way, I think, for folks to continue their education and learning about the intersections of technology, government, and social impact. We also do a variety of panels and different engagements. Actually, later this week, we're going to do a Grad School 101 panel with some of our alumni who are currently in grad school to talk about their experiences and kind of mentor our younger fellows and tell them a little bit more about the process and how to apply. So we try and continue to build kind of opportunities as our fellowship community grows. We also really do a kind of a big part of our alumni community is also helping us recruit and engage the next generation of fellows. So they help us with everything from the application review process to interviewing new fellows, and really play a big role in helping us expand our reach and be able to engage kind of more folks.
That's amazing. So alumni are kind of part of everything that is behind the scenes as well when it comes to Coding It Forward. They're part of the recruitment process going forward, but also engaging in things like book clubs. That sounds like a great experience. And Nick and Emelin, I'm just wondering, I would love to hear about what some of your favorite experiences were in the program, or even as alum, if there's been an experience that really sticks out to you. And it could be work related, or it could be about your cohort and those experiences. But yeah, any top 3 favorites that come to mind? Emelin, how about you?
Okay, yeah. I guess since I was a little bit more recent, I fresh in my head, but I guess one of the cool things that I got to experience as a CDF fellow was that I wanted to work specifically on like a privacy project outside of my data science project. So it was like amazing that like my manager at the time, or project lead at the time, was like, okay, you get to work on this, but let me introduce you to like all these tens of thousands of people that like work in privacy. And she got me like really well connected, and I got to work on that privacy project as well. So I think that was like amazing because she understood my background, and she was like, I really want you to have lots of exposure here. And I did my fellowship at that NIH, so the National Institutes of Health. So that was just really exciting. And then that was like more of a professional one, and then a personal one, I guess, to just like really connecting with the other fellows. As for the duration of my fellowship, I was like alone for my project, but overall I felt like more together because I could just like lean on other fellows and talk to them. And eventually, we just like became friends. Like we still hold like little game nights and stuff like that we get to engage in. So it's it's been really fun, like building a family. And I think those two are like my favorite experiences from the fellowship. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. How about you, Nick?
So again, sort of 2 categories, just like Emelin, professionally and personally. Professionally, one thing I really, really loved was that you weren't just part of the Civic Digital Fellowship family, you're also part of a broader family in Civic Tech. And so we had a number of events where we were with Presidential Innovation Fellows, or members of the US Digital Service, or Tech Congress Fellows. There was one event where we were at a barbecue with all of these different groups, and that set of experiences was really awesome because on one hand you got to meet really cool people, but also those people often have jobs or internships and other opportunities. And I found 3 of the next 4 internships I did after the Civic Digital Fellowship through the people I met in the Civic Digital Fellowship. So yeah, professionally, awesome experience. Personally, also an awesome experience. I was talking about earlier around getting to meet all of these awesome like-minded people. That also means you get to do a lot of things with these awesome like-minded people. And so for me, that ranged from everything from having an idea about how loan forgiveness might be able to encourage more young civic technologists to explore careers in government. And me and a couple other Civic Digital Fellows just started researching that together. Started out at a hackathon that Rachel and Chris hosted. And then we took it from there and like kept working and iterating on it. And I was able to find peers who were really excited about that too. And then just socially, there were just random nights where we'd say, hey, let's go, walk the monuments, and we'd walk around DC at night. And that was awesome. And I'm sorry, Emelin, that you didn't have the experience, but it sounds like you were also able to find community. And for me, that community has been really awesome. I've continued to stay in touch with them too. And I am really looking forward to, after COVID is all over, hopefully meeting up with many of them again.
That's great. And boy, do I miss barbecues, but I also think it's amazing that, Emelin, you were able to build such a tight-knit community in this kind of virtual world, because that's a real challenge. And I think, a lot of programs have had to do that transition. And so hats off to Rachel and her team, because I think that they've shown that they can do that successfully, even if it's not the most ideal of circumstances. So that's also great to hear. And so, kind of thinking about the professional side of things, I'm kind of curious, Nick and Emelin, and Rachel, as someone who also was part of the original cohort, I'm curious, how did government and doing the work in government kind of change your perspective professionally, right? What do you think you took away from it that, Emelin, you're going into the private sector. So what do you think that you'll bring with you? And for Nick and Rachel, how do you think that is kind of something that informs your work as it's going right now? Whoever wants to start, maybe Rachel, I'll put you on the spot first for that one.
Sure. So I've always been someone who's been extremely public service minded. In high school, I was involved with my governor's youth commission and my mayor's youth council, got to college and actually thought I was going to be a government major. So probably comes to no surprise to anyone who knows me well that I ended up kind of working in this intersection of government and technology. It's always been kind of part of my learning journey. It's always been kind of part of my career trajectory. I think in terms of why I wanted to stick with Coding It Forward and kind of continue working specifically in this space to bring more young people into government, I also got that sense of community, even though at the time we were only 14 fellows, I think. It was the first time I'd ever really seriously engaged with peers in this space who, were supportive of one another, who really wanted to kind of challenge each other to use our skills for good. And I recognized that if our team didn't do the work to continue expanding the fellowship and to continue expanding other opportunities, that most likely this was going to fall to the wayside until someone, picked it up again a few years later. And so I really wanted to continue the momentum that we had, and was lucky enough to be able to continue doing that while I was still in college. And then once I graduated a few years ago, joined the team full time and have been with it ever since. But I'm really proud of the fact that we've been able to grow so tremendously in the past few years. I want to continue not only to scale and to continue to grow our opportunities, but also to make sure that we're maintaining a high quality standard. I don't want people to come into the Civic Digital Fellowship and say, wow, that was a really terrible experience and I never want to work in government. We really want to make sure it's a good experience. It's something that, people are inspired by and really hope to use that as a jumping off point for folks. So that's why I stayed with the team. I'm excited about what we're doing going forward, and it's kind of my journey.
Yeah, that's great. Nick, how about you? How do you feel like it kind of impacted your perspective? I feel like you're still very much in this civic tech ecosystem. So you must have been persuaded by the program that Rachel has helped to develop.
Yes. The short answer is yes. There were a couple of things, big takeaways from my experience and then, subsequent work in civic tech. I think one that's really important, especially for many of our viewers who are probably straddling private sector experience and thinking about jumping into a program like this, that you learn that the incentives are different. When you're building technology in the government, the incentives that shape that are very, very different than the private sector. You can't treat a lot of the work in government like a business. You're not trying to maximize profit. You're trying to deliver services for the American people. So on one hand, that changes how you approach it. On the other hand, it gives you a lot of meaning in the work because it's very, very clear what your impact is and how it's going to help people. So I think that's a really awesome experience to have, even if you plan on going into the private sector afterward, or you're not really convinced that government work is for you and you want to check it out. I think it's good to have that experience and see sort of how the public sector not only thinks about problems, but has to think about problems given the broader constraints of the work. Another important thing, I think, is that you can do meaningful work in public sector technology without experience in, say, the private sector or previous experience in the public sector, right? The Civic Digital Fellowship, I think, is a very, very clear example of how you can sort of jump in. You still, for a lot of these roles, you still do need technical expertise, but you don't need to have, 2 or 3 years at some big tech company first. No, you can go in. You can just go start doing the work. There are a lot of folks in civic tech who like to say, government is who shows up. And that's very, very true here, and you can be a part of that. And so I think that's a really, really important message to drive home. The last sort of big takeaway from me was that that we also need policy support around a lot of this civic tech work, right? We've a lot of the challenges with getting young civic technologists into government is not just a demand side problem. I think Rachel can tell you about how many applicants the Civic Digital Fellowship gets every year, but we need to be creating more opportunities in the government to take in many of these fellows, and obviously do so in a way that ensures that the quality of the experience is, still where it is today. And so I got excited about some of the policy questions around this too. How can we think about some of the structures around a lot of the civic tech work so that it isn't 3 or 3.5% of technologists in the government that are under the age of 30, but we can think about broader change to really scale that number. And I think Coding It Forward has shown us a path forward and how we could bring a lot more technologists into the government.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And I think you're so right. It takes an ecosystem to really move the ball forward in terms of modernizing our IT infrastructure. And I really love what you said about, you don't need, you need the technical skills, but you don't need to have a long resume to be able to contribute. There's a need for folks with technical skills in government. And a lot of folks have a lot they can contribute, even if they might have thought otherwise. Emelin, would love to hear your perspective about what you think you might be bringing from your experience, kind of as you look to entering the private sector, and what you're excited for, or maybe what you think is going to be a challenge based on that.
Yeah, I think Nick hit on something that I was just going to address, and it's that incentive thing. Like, in my mind, I want to do more social impact, but I did choose a private company, right? So that does come with that different kind of business model. And the reason that I chose it was because it was in this little intersection of like tech and policy. So I'd be doing something called privacy engineering. So it's really just looking out for the users, whether they are Americans or whether they are from other countries. So I just really wanted to, gauge that experience of understanding the policy between, privacy policies, and then applying that to these services. How deeply or far can I get into that is, depending on the company, but it's definitely an experience that I want to have, and something that, I want to just like kind of build my journey in, because eventually I do want to get back into government. I do want to build a little bit more experience, but that's just a personal choice. Like Nick mentioned, there's so many different routes. This one's just mine. Another thing that I wanted to hit was that within this privacy engineering, I guess within this role, I hope there's this thing at Google where you do a 20% project and you can spend that on like anything. So they have this organization called google.org, which focuses on a lot of like election security stuff, or things that you're interested in. So if you want to start an initiative, you could, if you have all the right support and all the, you check all the boxes. So that's something that I'm really interested in getting engaged in. I did it last summer, last summer, before I was before I was a CDF. I did it last summer at Google, where I worked with a couple of nonprofits on organizing basically police data to help them see if they to get some important insights basically on policing, if they were doing it right, if they were doing it wrong in NYC. So I want to continue doing this meaningful work on the side as I kind of figure out my journey, and I think having a community like CDF or CIF, Coding It Forward, I can really lean on this experience and just like continue to build and, gain that support. Like, hey, am I doing this right? Or am I not doing this right? How can I want to start this. How do I get there? So, I hope to bring this perspective of I'm working for the American people. I'm working for the people of this country, and I hope to deliver them something great. So, yeah.
I love that. And it's so interesting to hear about what you're going to be working on, because I feel like it just really drives home that cross-sector perspectives are critical, right? Public sector needs folks from the private sector who have that insight, and vice versa, right? I think it's really interesting to hear about how you'll bring your experience working on privacy issues with Coding It Forward last summer to your work at Google when you begin that. So I just think that really drives home that point. Rachel, I would love to talk about how people apply to Coding It Forward. Who's eligible and who makes for a good candidate?
Yeah, for sure. So applications for the fellowship are closed right now, but they typically open in the winter around November, December, depending on our timeline for the year. Folks who are eligible are typically either currently enrolled in or very recently graduated from either an undergraduate or graduate degree program. You do have to be a US citizen due to federal hiring regulations. That's just something we can't get around at the moment. And then also folks who, are interested in these intersections, you don't need to have experience in civic tech. It's completely fine if you've never even heard the word or term civic tech before. We look for folks from all backgrounds. There's no major requirements. You don't even have to be a computer science major to apply. We're just looking for people who have technical experience, whether that's in courses, previous internships, jobs, etc., and who are interested in exploring these intersections. But what I will say is that applications are currently open for our sister program to the fellowship, which is the Civic Innovation Corps. And it's not something we talked about at length here, but it's very similar. It's also a summer internship experience, but with states and cities, which frankly really need our help right now, especially in this pandemic. They've been hit incredibly hard on a fiscal level, but also on a delivery level for being able to fulfill services for their citizens. And we are currently recruiting for that until Sunday, February 28th, so a little bit less than a week. And our eligibility requirements are actually a little bit broader. So it's not only limited to folks who are currently enrolled in school, but also recent boot camp graduates as well. And then in addition, you do not have to be a US citizen. You just have to be authorized to work in the United States. So that's something we're also really excited about because that opens up our programming to DACA recipients and also permanent residents as well. So if you're interested, definitely check out our website, codingitforward.com. You'll find all the information you need there to apply.
That's great. And that's really exciting. I'm so excited about the state and local level work because I think that's so crucial. And to the degree that the federal government isn't necessarily getting enough love, I think state and local governments are certainly not. And so you were touching on this, but I would love for you to even just explain a little bit more, like why now, right? Like why is it the right moment for someone to apply to that program or later this year to the fellowship? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think of all things, this pandemic has really exacerbated the need for critical service delivery. I think in the past 6-12 months, we've all seen the news stories about insurance websites crashing, about folks not being able to get SNAP benefits, about even the vaccine rollout being really challenging to register for an appointment. That's happening at the state and local level, as well as the federal level. There's need for technologists to help solve these problems from a user-centric, citizen-centric perspective at every single level. And I think long beyond the pandemic's end, this is going to continue being a critical need. There's a lot of recovery in the road ahead, and we need folks to help. I think beyond that, there's always exciting challenges. I mean, Nick worked before we ever knew there was going to be a pandemic, and he got to touch one of the most visited websites in the entire country. I think it's only behind like the weather service, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe US
Postal Service sometimes, yeah.
Okay, yeah, people tracking on packages.
Especially around Christmas time, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, so the scale of impact that you can have both in this pandemic world that we're currently living in, but also beyond, I think is just really amazing. But I think the need right now in particular is critical.
Mm-hmm.
That's perfect. Thank you for sharing that. And I think just one last thing, I kind of was hoping that everyone could share, and I'll let you all sit with it, and whoever wants to jump in first can. But if you had, a peer or a friend who was on the fence about this, what would you tell them, right? What advice would you give them, and why? I'm going to suppose that you're going to recommend that they apply. Why would you suggest that they apply?
I can start. I mean, it is my job to recruit folks into this fellowship, but I also think I'm always going to level with our candidates. I'm always going to, think about them and what's best in terms of their next steps. What I will say is that this fellowship or internship program is only 10 weeks of your life. In the grand scheme of your career, that's not a lot of time to give up. And it's a really big opportunity to figure out whether or not this space is something that you might be interested in. So our fellows and our alumni have pursued so many different career trajectories, whether that's been staying in government, whether that's been pursuing social impact opportunities or the private sector or further academia. But, what do you have to lose for 10 weeks? I don't think a whole lot, in my personal opinion. And I think you have so much to gain from being a part of this community, from trying public service, from understanding how our government works. If you fall in love with it, fantastic. I'm super excited and I hope you do. But if you also decide that's not the right next step for you, there are so many lessons to learn that you can take into other sectors as well.
Yeah, love that. High quality experience, relatively short term commitment. Yeah, that's great. Nick or Emelin?
Yeah, I can give it a shot. I'll basically be echoing what Rachel said. It's 10 weeks to come in, get that experience, and if you like it, great. Now you've figured out that this is what you want to do or some flavor of that. And if you don't, well, you've learned a lot and you have a cool thing to talk about. So that's fun. Yeah. But I think one really important thing is, I think most people who are excited or interested about this are coming in with some desire to do something around social impact, right? They have that lens already beginning with coming in. And I think this experience really lets you figure out your own thoughts around what social impact is and where you sort of fit into that broader constellation of people working on social impact oriented projects, right? So you might come in and you're excited about social impact and you do the fellowship and you realize, well, government work isn't exactly for me, but now you've ruled that out. And so you've got other social impact spaces to go explore. Or you might start to figure out that other specific parts of public service that are especially exciting to me. If you're me, you realize that, product management is fun in the government, but like we're starting to get a little more excited about policy questions. And so you start kind of meandering in that direction, right? And like Rachel was saying, fellows go in so many different directions, even within government. The people who stay in government spaces also take very different paths within that arena. So I think it's really, really helpful to get that perspective and be able to use that perspective to inform your future decisions.
And then I guess for me, do it, like apply. So I did another panel before and I had a couple of people reach out to me afterwards asking me like, should I do this? Should I not do this? And I always told them like, if you're even asking me this question, you should be applying right now, because obviously you have a desire to do this work. And just think about all the people who want that desire in you, who want that passion in you. You should definitely apply if you're thinking about it, because you do meaningful work. And obviously you might be a person that, wants to engage in social impact, and we want to cultivate that. We want to gain your interest. And like Rachel and Nick said, like if this happens to not be the route you want to take, at least, you know that. And, but definitely apply. There's no risk in it besides gaining something, and you'll have fun, I promise. So yeah.
That's great. Well, I think that's a fantastic note to end on. I really want to thank you all for your time today. It was great to talk to you and learn a little bit more about your experience. I, for one, am quite jealous that I was not a Coding It Forward fellow. Wish I could redo that, but it was great to hear about all the great takeaways you had from it. I would like to encourage everyone to check out Coding It Forward at codingitforward.org, as well as to visit usftech.org to learn more about other job opportunities and information in the civic tech space and resources to be a competitive applicant. I'm sorry, it's codingitforward.com. So threw you for a loop there. But be sure to check it out. And thank you everyone so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.